We'll hand on then to our final speaker, Dan Dowling, who's Director of Cities, Climate and Sustainability at PwC. And I think Dan's going to particularly focus on the blueprint for delivery and on the net zero challenge. So over to you, Dan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for staying for the last speaker. I feel a bit like the sustainability person that usually gets added on to other topic areas, because I'm going to talk about the thing that I think is actually most important, of course, but I'm at the back of the queue. So I hope to get your attention with this. I am passionate about the delivery challenge, and I think Andrew set it out really clearly for you there. You know, with all of the great work and the capability that a local authority has, delivery is so far away from the scale of the need at the moment that we urgently need to resolve this. So I'd like to share with you just some thoughts, and in quite a conversational way. I have thoughts on this. I haven't prepared a long slide deck, although I know Ethan's got a slide he can share in a moment just to add to it. But I'm working on the basis, I guess, here that that the case has been made to some degree, that the why question, I know there are gaps, but I think we're getting there. I think also with the UK's net zero commitment, I think we've kind of got the political will there and a better platform in society and government to make things happen. I also think, and I strain this point, but understand its limitations, that we kind of know what the solutions are. And I think this kind of business of climate action planning, whilst it's important, and some cities in particular haven't yet got those plans in place, I think we know how to do that quite well, as Ben set out earlier. But also, as Ben and others have said, we need to translate that into delivery. And therein lies the challenge. And I can't emphasize the gap that Andrew described between the great pilots and projects and things that are happening that we need to learn from, and the ability to scale that, and the architecture of how that scaling is done. And I assert that we're a long way off resolving that. And I'm going to focus on the UK context because it's really important to understand how government is structured and works in terms of understanding how we deliver this. So I'm going to just run through a 5-point, what I call delivery blueprint for this, and for the purposes of stimulating some debate around it. Okay, so I'm also going to use the framing of a decade of action. I'm going to take the lead of local authorities that have declared a climate emergency, and whilst I know the commitments range from 2028 to 2050 in total, we're kind of talking about a decade of action that's very important. The second point is, let's not get confused about the whole place mandate. Decarbonising a council and decarbonising a city are very different prospects. The difference is about 99% of emissions. So let's just be absolutely clear on decarbonising a place is everybody's home, right? And that just, you know, from a sort of commercial risk perspective, that creates an enormous red flag, okay? How on earth do we make that happen? And I'll get to the commercials in a moment. So I believe that particularly in the UK, with our current governance structure and powers given to local authorities, we have a whole systemic kind of reform issue with needing to deliver the radical change at the speed and the scale that's required. Lots of this is about market failures as well. The business case has not been articulated. The investment case does not exist, full stop, for place-based climate action, and therefore mobilising the private pocket of the citizens at large, mobilising the investment community, and even mobilising Treasury. We're not there on any of those accounts. Okay, so nothing's going to happen. That's the reality. Nothing will happen. So that's where we are. So what do we do? Okay, actually, let me just explain the gap in a couple of other terms. Another issue around this is the siloed mandates of delivery. Not deliberately siloed, but I guess the disparate mandates between local gov, between national utilities and highways, for example, and then the role of central government, which has been flagged as a critical part of the overall picture. And we live in a centralised governance structure here in the UK, and therefore, but we're not seeing centralised action on place-based change. So you get a complete disconnect between local ambition, and by the way, I'm a big supporter of local authorities and their capability to deliver, and the purse strings and the policy structures and reforms that live in the middle. The scale of funding, and I've not done the maths on this yet, but I've estimated the investment scale, just to give a sense of scale here, to be something like £5 to £10 billion per city. And I'm thinking of a large regional city, maybe Cardiff's a good example, and Andrew would have a better number. But we're talking about a £5 to £10 billion investment envelope here that we need to fund and finance. And I note the difference between those two words. We can't just fund all of this from government, right, and from taxpayer. Now that's just a huge scale. Something I do every year is I comb through all of the local authority budgets, particularly their capital spend budgets, and look at what's being earmarked to deliver against energy, climate, transport, transition. And I'd love to hear more from Andrew on this, but understandably, and not at all at the fault of local authorities, I see that there's still nothing there. And so I know for the next year, nothing's going to happen. Right, so we continue to have this challenge. There's a national infrastructure bank that I'll speak to in a minute, which could be key to this. The last thing we don't have, I'll get onto the positive in a moment, is if you like, the 10-year surge capacity and skills that we need to deliver. So if I were trying to deliver this within a city council, I would require a team of at least 20 people just to get the thing moving. And usually this mandate lands probably on the side of the desk of a environment, energy, etc., infrastructure related senior local government official. I mean, it's just an impossible ask. Okay, so lots of challenges on delivery, really of great concern, but we've got the foundation of conditions that could allow us to do the right thing. My blueprint for action, or blueprint for delivery, is focused on asking national government to listen to the following messages and support and work with all of the other actors to deliver. So the first thing we need to do is actually, Ethan, it'd be great if you could pop up the slide now, because I guess I can just run through the 5 things quickly. The first thing is a sort of governing blueprint. So there's a couple of different parts to this. The first one is to actually design a consistent methodology that makes sense for not necessarily all cities, because I endorse local action in local ways, but there are parts of the approach to decarbonising and delivering that I think it's important we drive some consistency on. And this is particularly about the governing mandate and roles between different actors in delivering the solution. What is the role of national utilities, be it the gas or energy retail, energy distribution companies? What do we do with the supply side on energy, and how does that relate to local demand centres in cities? These issues are not resolved by any means. So there's no coordinated approach to action and investment that can be undertaken. The second thing we need is some consistency and guidance from Treasury on place-based business cases. So the economic models, general equilibrium models, which are used to generate jobs and investment outputs for big national investments, they don't help us deal with local economic development and how people and jobs interact in geography, right? So we don't have nationally recognized approaches, methodologies, and models for building the investment cases which will bring forward central government investment. And then thirdly, we need to make sure that we have the actors arranged in a framework for delivery where the incentives, risks, etc., are all aligned in a way that makes sense. If we all understood how that worked and interlocked with our local government patchwork across the UK, then we could begin to design actions, and also they would be scalable in the sense that everywhere would have access to a similar blueprint. Okay, on special powers of execution, I think that this is a tricky one, but it's about reforming the way that national and local government work together. So I think there are certain things that there are barriers which just prevent us being able to do the things that we need to. Andrew mentioned a good example earlier, which is the ability of local government to retain tax revenues of certain types. It happens in different ways in different countries, but whether it's property tax, even income tax, although I think that's probably a stretch for the UK, there are ways to raise revenue locally. There are also instruments like land value capture, which are underutilized in the UK and offer huge potential for areas with strong development agendas. So we need to be able to unlock some of these barriers. Borrowing as well, of course, local authorities can borrow through the Public Loans Works Boards, and there is a UK Municipal Bonds Agency. The whole US infrastructure in urban areas was financed through municipal bonds. It's not an instrument we use in the UK, it could be another way to change what we do. But at the moment, we do not offer those finance raising abilities of cities. So I'm not saying those are the right things to do for every city, but there are different powers of execution that need to be provided. That goes through to planning as well, right? So we're going to have to reform and take some hits, if I can call them that, some compromises around the way we plan, design, deliver. And that doesn't mean bad planning and delivery. It just means freeing the system up and allowing to make some either temporary or other types of changes. And that might involve reigniting some of the previous work we've done in this country around the role of municipal development corporations, for example. So that might sound like a real estate dream for private investors, but actually what does a municipal development corporation that has a core mandate of climate transition look like? And why would that be of use? Because it offers a different type of legal and financial investment vehicle that can allow things to happen that would otherwise not be possible. Right, so there's just some quick thoughts around that. Just to draw breath for a second, you can see I've tried to map some of these across the different sort of groups of stakeholders involved. This is by no means supposed to be an accurate picture. I just thought I better put a slide together whilst I was listening to other people speaking, and thought this just sort of maps out a bit of the landscape I'm speaking to. I would draw your attention to the fact that society, citizens at large, just thinking about Rebecca's words just now, and maybe surprisingly, the private sector and investment at large cuts across all areas, as does local government, who I see, if I can use these words in the right way, as a problem owner. One of the issues is whose problem is this to own and lead on? And I personally think that local government is the leadership for these things, even if they don't have all of the mandates to deliver. Okay, so I was getting on to number three. I sort of referred to this earlier, and I'll speak to it very quickly. I really think a typical significant sized city is going to need a multidisciplinary 10-year transition team and these are people who know how to deliver infrastructure, put deals together, face off with the private sector, manage risk, and program manage delivery at scale. And we're talking billions. So this is a serious capability. I understand that local authorities don't have these raw resources at their disposal. Again, remember, this is a 5-point plan to central government at the moment. Okay, new commercial structures. I guess it went halfway there with the Municipal Development Corporation as an example here. And I talked about financial instruments such as municipal bonds and whatnot. I think key here, though, is creating special purpose vehicles into which we can play a range of assets and investment. The example that I think anchors this best is the LEAP model in Bristol, which some of you will be familiar with. It's not quite right, but it's a great window through which to start seeing the solution, I think. So in Bristol, I'm going to paraphrase this greatly, they've pulled together a bunch of energy assets, demand, supply, offtake agreements, etc., and even some land assets, right? And they put that together and are looking for a sort of long-term concession to actually manage and deliver a net zero objective. And what's happening there is the private sector is then assembling the skills, capability, and the banking capacity to make that happen. And I think that's the type of structure that can begin to deliver significant action and scale. And the thing that I'm most interested to explore with central government is how we make a geography of these commercial structures. So what about reverse auctioning off the delivery of the climate challenge, not to the private sector? I know I can understand what sort of reactions that might create, but I'm just oversimplifying, with all the right safeguards and co-design, how could you give a mandate to a concessionaire to help deliver, home insulation, including all of the right incentives, subsidies, and things that are required? How could you get the demand and supply piece working, and then interfacing with battery storage and EVs and all the rest of it, and getting that whole system to work under some sort of single contract that would allow every person, business, etc., in a given place to have access to that? It's just a thought. It's probably not the solution, but I'm talking about turning on its head the way stuff happens. Otherwise, we ain't going to meet this challenge. Finally, the public-private interlock piece is key. So much of the investment, much of the delivery capacity has to come from the private sector. That needs to be really well governed and really carefully overseen and safeguarded, as I mentioned. But we just, I think, need to understand what a big role the private sector has, and frankly, what a small role it currently has. Key to that, as you can see from some of the recent policy announcements and difficulties around the 10-point plan announced by government, the delivery chain, the supply chain just isn't there. The skill sets in industry aren't there because we don't have the scale, the policy certainty and the scale of demand available to actually grow those skills, grow those jobs, and grow those organizations that can help us deliver that. So I think that that last piece is really about just thinking about the right framework for bringing public-private relationships together for delivery. Okay, I think I'll just pause there. I should mention that the government now has a National Infrastructure Bank, or will have soon. I'd strongly encourage them to have a significant green funding window through that. I know the Green Investment Bank was sort of sold off, but I think there's a new mandate here that's still really important. I know many of the academic economists at Grantham and other places are supportive of that. So, and I think the city deals structure is worth looking at as a way of getting some of that funding back out into the places that matter. And I think to some extent, I'm just thinking short-term run up to COP, we need some sort of demonstrator that brings some of this to life and tests some of these delivery ideas so that we can unpick them, see the risks, fix them, make it right. I think it'd be wonderful if some of these citizens' assemblies or juries could work as part of a coalition to help shape that, along with a few typologies of local government structures, so that we really get that right. I think if we can do that, then I'd like to think we've got some of the basis on which we can scale delivery in a national approach. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. That was really interesting, and I think has really crystallised the nature and scale of the challenge that we face, and has usefully, I think, brought together a number of the themes that we've probably touched upon throughout the day. So thank you very much. That was really, really interesting.